A small hand rose through the chaos, fingers pressed together, thumb tucked tight. The signal meant danger, meant help, meant everything a voice could say when sound refused to come. A 6-year-old boy stood frozen in a river of strangers, mouth open but silent. Around him, thousands of travelers rushed toward gates and baggage claims, their footsteps echoing off terminal glass like thunder. None of them saw the signal. None of them stopped. Except one. Across the concourse, a German shepherd's ears pricked forward. The dog saw what humans missed. And in that moment, when Officer Henry followed his partner's gaze and spotted the terrified child with his hand raised in desperate silence, a question hung in the air. What happens when the only one who hears a silent scream is a dog trained to protect? Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below.
Ryan Mitchell was 6 years old and had not spoken in 8 months. He walked beside his mother through Terminal B, his small hand tucked into hers, his other arm wrapped around a stuffed lion named Chester. His blonde hair fell across his forehead, almost touching the frames of glasses that made his gray eyes look larger than they were. He wore a gray turtleneck sweater his grandmother had sent for Christmas, jeans with reinforced knees, and sneakers that lit up red when he walked. Around his right wrist was a medical alert bracelet, the metal catching light as he moved. To anyone watching, he looked like any other child navigating the overwhelming cathedral of the airport, a little quiet, perhaps, staying close to his mother, but nothing unusual. They couldn't see the 8 months of silence that lived inside him like a stone. They couldn't see the night that had stolen his voice. It had happened in early spring. Ryan remembered it in fragments, the way memory protects children from what they cannot carry whole. His father's voice rising, his mother's fear, the sound of something breaking. Ryan standing in the doorway of his bedroom in his pajamas with the trucks on them, watching his father's hands on his mother's throat. The way she looked at Ryan even as she struggled to breathe, her eyes saying, "Run, baby, run." The neighbor who heard the screaming and called 911, the police lights painting his house red and blue through the windows. The moment his voice disappeared. Not slowly, not gradually, just gone, as if some circuit inside him had overloaded and shut down to prevent total collapse. The doctors called it selective mutism, a trauma response where the ability to speak vanishes in certain situations, or in Ryan's case, in all situations. His vocal cords worked fine, his cognitive function was perfect, but the pathway between thought and speech had been severed by terror, and no amount of encouragement or therapy or begging could rebuild it, not yet. His mother, Sarah, had learned to read his communication in other ways, the tilt of his head, the pressure of his hand, the drawings he made when words refused to come. She had learned patience deeper than oceans. She had learned to forgive herself for the moments when her own guilt rose up and threatened to drown them both. Today, they were flying to her sister's house in Michigan for Christmas. A fresh start, she kept saying, a chance to heal somewhere new. Ryan didn't mind flying. He liked watching planes lift into the sky, liked imagining he was light enough to float up with them, away from everything heavy. As they walked through the terminal, he caught sight of a massive window overlooking the tarmac. A 747 was pushing back from the gate, its nose turning slowly, sun breaking through winter clouds to illuminate the white fuselage. Ryan stopped walking. His hand slipped from his mother's without him noticing. He pressed his face close to the glass, watching the plane's landing gear, the workers in orange vests guiding it with lit wands, the graceful, terrible power of something so huge learning to move. Behind him, an elderly woman stumbled and fell, her cane clattering across the polished floor. Sarah turned at the sound, saw the woman struggling, her groceries spilling from a torn bag. Instinct pulled Sarah forward. "Wait right here, sweetie," she said to the space where Ryan had been standing, but Ryan was 6 steps away, absorbed in the window, and didn't hear. Sarah knelt beside the woman, helping her sit up, checking for injuries. "Are you all right? Don't try to stand yet." The woman clutched Sarah's arm, shaken and grateful. Travelers stepped around them, rivers of people flowing past the small crisis. It took 90 seconds, that's all. 90 seconds for Sarah to help the woman to a nearby bench, to gather the scattered groceries, to make sure she wasn't hurt. When Sarah turned back to the window, Ryan was gone. Her heart stopped before her mind caught up. She took 3 steps forward, scanning the glass. No small boy in a gray sweater. She spun, eyes raking the crowd. Holiday travelers packed the terminal shoulder to shoulder, a sea of coats and luggage and winter hats. 5 different directions he could have wandered, 1,000 faces, and none of them his. "Ryan!" Her voice cracked, then louder, pushing through the noise. "Ryan!" The crowd swallowed her words like they had swallowed her son. At the window, Ryan had finally turned back to show his mother the plane. His hand reached out for hers and found empty air. He looked left, looked right. His mother's blue coat was gone. The elderly woman was gone. Instead, a wall of strangers pressed past him, people talking on phones, dragging suitcases, checking boarding passes. The crowd shifted and moved, and Ryan stood perfectly still inside it, a small stone in a river. His mouth opened. The word mama formed in his mind, traveled down to his throat, pressed against his closed lips, but nothing came out, not a sound, not a whisper. His voice had left him 8 months ago, and it would not return now, no matter how desperately he needed it. The panic hit like ice water. His breathing quickened. The lights seemed too bright, the noise too loud. Everyone was too close and too tall and moving too fast. He tried to push through to where his mother had been standing, but a businessman's rolling suitcase blocked his path. He tried to go around, but a family with 4 children swept past, separating him further from the window. Ryan's chest tightened. His hands began to shake. Chester the lion fell from his grip and disappeared under someone's shoe. He wanted to scream. He wanted to call out. He wanted his mother more than he had ever wanted anything. But 6-year-old Ryan Mitchell, lost in an airport terminal with 10,000 strangers, could not make a single sound. The world became a blur of legs and suitcases and voices that meant nothing. Ryan tried to stand still, thinking that if he didn't move, his mother would find him easier. But standing still in a crowd meant being pushed, jostled, knocked sideways by people who didn't see him or didn't care. A woman's purse swung into his shoulder. A man's briefcase caught his arm. Someone stepped on his foot and kept walking. He was drowning on dry land. Ryan reached out and grabbed a woman's coat sleeve. She was talking on her phone, distracted, moving fast. He tugged. She glanced down, her expression flickering between annoyance and confusion, then shook him off without breaking stride in her conversation. "No, I told them the presentation needs to be ready by—" Her voice faded into the crowd. He tried again, an older man in a business suit. Ryan stepped in front of him, waving both hands. The man sidestepped smoothly, barely registering the obstacle, eyes locked on his phone screen. Ryan might as well have been invisible. A teenage girl with headphones, a couple arguing about gate numbers, a family rushing toward security. Ryan tried them all. Some glanced at him, most didn't. None stopped. In an airport, a child standing alone didn't trigger alarm. Parents were always nearby, just out of sight, probably in the bathroom or buying coffee. No one imagined he was truly lost. No one imagined he couldn't speak. The terminal announcements crashed over him in waves. "Attention passengers on Flight 2847 to Denver, now boarding at Gate C12. This is a reminder that unattended baggage will be confiscated by airport security. Final boarding call for Flight 1563 to Atlanta." The voices overlapped, distorted by the terminal's acoustics, becoming a wall of sound that pressed against his ears until he wanted to cover them with his hands. But he needed his hands free. He needed to find help. Ryan's breathing came faster now, sharp little gasps that didn't seem to bring enough air.
His chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. His vision narrowed at the edges. The crowd seemed to press closer, even though no one was touching him. This was how it had started that night 8 months ago. This feeling of the world closing in, of being trapped with no way out, of needing to scream, but having no voice to scream with. His mother's words surfaced through the panic, like a lifeline thrown into dark water. If you're ever lost, baby, find a police officer. They'll help you. They'll keep you safe. Police officer. Ryan's eyes scanned the crowd desperately. He needed to find a uniform, a badge, someone whose job was to help. But the terminal was too big, the crowd too thick. How could he find anyone when he could barely see past the wall of moving bodies? And even if he found an officer, how could he explain? How could he ask for help when his voice was a door that wouldn't open? The panic threatened to pull him under completely. His hands trembled. Tears burned hot in his eyes, but he blinked them back, afraid that crying would make the fear worse, would make him smaller and more lost than he already was. Then he remembered. It came to him like light breaking through clouds. 3 months ago, before everything got so heavy, before the therapy appointments and the worried looks and the constant gentle questions he couldn't answer, his school had hosted a safety program. Officer Jennings had come with her canine partner, a friendly golden retriever named Biscuit. She'd taught them about strangers, about safe adults, about what to do in emergencies. And she'd taught them signals. Some of you might not be able to talk when you're scared. Your voice might freeze up. That's okay. That happens to lots of people. So we're going to learn a special signal that means I need help without using words. She'd shown them, hand raised, fingers pressed together, thumb tucked in, the silent signal for help. Ryan had practiced that day, thinking it was just a game, never imagining he'd be the one who couldn't speak, the one who'd need a voice without sound. Now, standing alone in the river of strangers, Ryan lifted his hand. His arm shook with the effort of holding it steady, fingers pressed tight together, thumb folded into his palm. The signal held up like a flag, like a prayer, like the only word he had left in a world that demanded speech. People walked past. A businessman checked his watch. A mother corralled 2 small children toward a departure gate. A young couple laughed at something on a shared phone screen. The crowd flowed around Ryan's small raised hand like water around a stone. No one stopped. No one saw. Ryan held the signal higher, his arm beginning to ache, his breathing still too fast, his heart hammering against his ribs. The tears he'd been holding back started to slip down his cheeks, silent as everything else about him. Someone had to see. Someone had to understand. The signal was supposed to work. Officer Jennings had promised it would work. Ryan stood in the center of Terminal B, hand raised in desperate silence, and waited for someone, anyone, to recognize the shape of a child drowning in plain sight.
Officer Henry Reeves had been a canine handler for 3 years and a patrol officer for 2 years before that. He knew the rhythms of airport security the way a musician knows scales, the ebb and flow of crowds between flights, the tight clusters near gates during boarding, the empty stretches when weather delayed departures. He knew which travelers to watch, the nervous ones who avoided eye contact, the ones whose stories didn't match their destinations, the ones who moved wrong through a space designed for predictable movement. What he didn't know yet was that predictability could blind you, that protocol could make you miss what mattered most. Henry moved through Terminal B with Diablo at his side, their 4th pass of the afternoon. His mind ran through the checklist: visual sweep for unattended bags, assessment of crowd density, monitoring for escalating conflicts. A delayed flight from Chicago had dumped 300 irritated passengers into an already packed terminal. His radio crackled with updates. Gate C7 needed assistance with an unruly passenger.
Security Checkpoint 2 had flagged a suspicious item, cleared after inspection. Routine problems, routine solutions. He saw the world in clear categories: threats and non-threats, violations and compliance, people who followed rules and people who didn't. It was efficient. It kept him focused. It had served him well through 5 years on the force, through academy training, through the structured discipline of canine partnership. There was comfort in protocol, in knowing the right response to every situation. Beside him, Diablo suddenly stopped walking. The German Shepherd's body went rigid, ears snapping forward with laser focus. His head tilted slightly, that particular angle that meant he'd detected something important. Not the alert for explosives, Henry knew that posture. Not the tracking stance when following a scent. This was different. This was Diablo seeing something Henry couldn't. "What is it, boy?" Henry's hand instinctively went to Diablo's back, feeling the tension in the dog's muscles. He followed Diablo's line of sight, scanning the crowd. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the standard chaos of holiday travel, families wrestling with luggage, business travelers typing on phones, the usual density of bodies moving in conflicting directions. Henry's eyes swept past the scene once, twice, trained to spot anomalies. Then he saw the hand. Small, raised above the crowd, held at an odd angle, not waving, not reaching up, but something else, something deliberate. Henry's mind caught on it, processing the shape. Fingers pressed together, thumb tucked. The hand trembled but stayed raised. Recognition hit him like cold water. That was a distress signal. The child safety program the department had implemented 6 months ago. Henry had helped demonstrate it at 3 schools. He'd watched Officer Jennings teach it to roomfuls of children. He'd thought it was a good idea in theory, never imagining he'd see it deployed in real life. The signal that meant, "I need help," when words won't come. Henry's perspective shifted. The crowd rearranged itself. Where he'd seen normal airport chaos, he now saw a small boy drowning in it. 6 years old, maybe 7, blonde hair, gray sweater, tears streaking his face, alone, terrified, hand raised like he was holding up the weight of the world. "Good boy, Diablo." Henry's voice was quiet, steady. "I see him." He moved forward carefully, not rushing. Sudden approaches scared children. He kept his posture open, non-threatening, even as his training kicked into high alert. Lost child, unknown duration, visible distress, possible medical emergency given the rapid breathing he could now see from 20 feet away. But his protocol-focused mind stuttered on one detail. Why the signal? Why not just call out? Why not grab an adult, cry, make noise? Ryan saw the uniform first, navy blue cutting through the sea of civilian clothes, then the badge that caught light, then the dog, German Shepherd, big and powerful and walking straight towards him. For one heartbeat, Ryan's fear spiked. Another stranger, another adult who might not understand. Then hope crashed through the fear like a wave breaking. Police officer. His mother had said, "Find a police officer." This was what he was supposed to do. This was the help he'd been signaling for. Henry watched the boy's face transform, terror giving way to desperate relief. The child's raised hand began to shake harder, his whole arm trembling with exhaustion and emotion. "I've got you, buddy. It's okay now." But Diablo didn't wait for commands. The German Shepherd moved forward with purpose, closing the distance to Ryan in 3 smooth strides. He didn't jump, didn't bark, didn't do anything that might startle the terrified child. Instead, Diablo positioned himself directly beside Ryan's left side and sat, his solid bulk pressing against the boy's leg. It was a protective stance, the same position Diablo took when guarding Henry during high-risk situations. The dog's body became a wall between Ryan and the crowd, a barrier that said, "This child is under my protection now." Ryan's raised hand finally dropped. His fingers found Diablo's fur, buried themselves in the thick coat. The dog's warmth bled through his sweater. The solid realness of the animal anchored him when everything else was chaos. Henry reached them, kneeling to Ryan's eye level. Up close, he could see the medical alert bracelet on his wrist, the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the way his free hand gripped Diablo's fur like a lifeline. The dog sat perfectly still, letting the child hold on, brown eyes watchful and calm. "Hey there, I'm Officer Reeves. This is Diablo. Can you tell me your name?" Ryan's mouth opened. His lips formed shapes, but no sound came out. And Henry Reeves, who saw the world in black and white categories, who trusted protocol and procedure above instinct, finally understood why a 6-year-old boy had raised his hand in a silent signal for help. The child couldn't speak.
Henry stayed at eye level, making himself smaller, less imposing. His training said establish rapport, get basic information, reunite with Guardian. Simple steps, clear protocol. But the boy's silence was already rewriting the script. "Are you lost, buddy?" Henry kept his voice gentle, the tone he'd use with any frightened child. Ryan nodded so hard his glasses slipped down his nose. His hand stayed buried in Diablo's fur, knuckles white with the grip. His eyes, gray and huge behind the lenses, held a desperation that made Henry's chest tighten. "Okay, that's all right. We're going to find whoever you're with." Henry pulled out his notebook, a habit from his first year in patrol. Write everything down. Document everything. "Can you tell me your name?" Ryan's mouth opened. His lips moved, shaping letters. His throat worked like he was trying to push something up and out. But no sound emerged. Not a whisper, not a breath, just silence where words should have been. Confusion flickered across Henry's face. Was the child too scared to speak? In shock? He'd seen trauma do strange things to people, kids especially, but this felt different. The boy was trying, desperately trying, his whole body strained with the effort of producing sound that wouldn't come. Diablo whined softly, a sound Henry had rarely heard from his partner. The dog pressed closer to Ryan, his head tilting up toward the boy's face. It was the same behavior Diablo showed when Henry was stressed or upset. Comfort, reassurance, a wordless promise of presence. Henry's eyes caught on something metallic at Ryan's wrist, a bracelet, thin silver chain with a medical alert tag. Henry had learned to check for these: allergies, diabetes, epilepsy, conditions that could turn a routine situation critical. He reached out slowly. "Can I see your bracelet for just a second?" Ryan extended his arm, still holding Diablo with the other hand. Henry read the engraving. "Ryan Mitchell, age 6, selective mutism, emergency contact, Sarah Mitchell." The words rearranged everything he thought he understood about the past 3 minutes. Not too scared to speak, not in shock. This child couldn't speak. The condition had a name, a medical diagnosis. This was who Ryan was, not just what the moment had made him. Understanding crashed through Henry like light through a broken window. The signal, the raised hand, the silent plea. Ryan had found a way to ask for help when his voice was a door that wouldn't open. The child safety program had given him language when his own wouldn't work. "Ryan," Henry said, the name like a promise. "I'm going to help you find your mom. Sarah, right?" Ryan nodded, tears spilling fresh down his cheeks. Relief and fear mixed together on his face. Henry's approach shifted like gears changing. He couldn't rely on verbal communication. Standard questions wouldn't work. He needed to meet Ryan in the space where the boy could actually reach him. Henry flipped open his notebook, pulled the pen from the spiral binding, and offered both to Ryan. "Can you draw her for me, your mom?" Ryan took the pen with shaking fingers. He pressed it to paper, and for a moment nothing happened. Then his hand moved, creating lines. A stick figure, simple, childlike, but deliberate. Long hair drawn in careful strokes, a dress or coat indicated by a triangle body. He added details, a smile, hands reaching out. "Your mom?" Henry asked, pointing to the drawing. Ryan nodded vigorously, tapping the figure with the pen tip. His eyes begged Henry to understand, to see what he couldn't say. "Got it. Sarah Mitchell. We're gonna find you, Ryan, I promise." Henry stood, keying his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I have a lost child at Terminal B, near Gate 48. Ryan Mitchell, age 6, male, non-verbal. Looking for his guardian, Sarah Mitchell. Need an all-terminal page and visual alert to TSA." The radio crackled back. "Copy that, Unit 47. Initiating page for Sarah Mitchell. Description of the guardian?" Henry looked down at Ryan, pointed to his own hair, then made a gesture for length. Ryan held his hand down to show his mother's hair fell past her shoulders. Henry pointed to his uniform shirt, cycling through colors. Ryan pointed emphatically when Henry touched his blue collar. No, lighter, sky blue. His mother wore a blue coat. "Guardian is adult female, brown hair, shoulder length, last seen wearing a light blue coat. Child has selective mutism, cannot verbally respond." "Understood. Paging now." Henry knelt again beside Ryan. The boy had stopped crying, but his breathing was still too fast, too shallow. The panic hadn't left, just paused. He needed to keep him calm until Sarah Mitchell appeared. He needed to build a bridge of trust across the silence. But when Henry shifted to move Ryan toward a quieter area near the wall, Diablo didn't budge. "Diablo, heel." The standard command, one the dog had obeyed thousands of times. Diablo stayed planted beside Ryan, looking up at Henry with an expression that was almost defiant. The dog's body remained pressed against the boy's leg, protective and immovable. Henry tried again. "Diablo, come." The German Shepherd's ears flicked back for a second, acknowledging he'd heard, but he didn't move. His attention returned to Ryan, watching the child's face, reading the fear still written there. In 3 years of partnership, Diablo had never refused a direct command. The dog's training was flawless, his obedience absolute. But now, faced with a 6-year-old boy who couldn't speak and couldn't stop shaking, Diablo chose something beyond training. He chose to stay. "All right, boy." Henry's voice was quiet, touched with something like awe. "We stay together then." He sat down on the terminal floor beside Ryan and Diablo. The crowd moved around them like water around stones. Ryan's hand stayed buried in Diablo's fur, knuckles white with the grip. Ryan's eyes, gray and huge behind the lenses, held a desperation that made Henry's chest tighten.
Sarah Mitchell's world collapsed the moment she turned back to the window and saw empty space where her son should have been. The elderly woman was settled on the bench, groceries gathered, breathing steadied. Sarah had done the right thing, the kind thing, the thing she'd taught Ryan to do, help people who need it. 90 seconds, that's all it had taken, less than 2 minutes to be a good person. And now Ryan was gone. "Ryan?" Her voice came out strangled, uncertain. She took 3 steps forward, scanning the window area. Maybe he'd just moved a few feet. Maybe he was still watching planes, oblivious to her absence. "Ryan?" No gray sweater, no blonde hair, no small boy clutching Chester the lion. The panic hit like a physical blow. Sarah spun, eyes raking the crowd. Families everywhere, children everywhere. None of them hers. The terminal stretched in 4 directions, endless corridors branching into more corridors, gates and shops and restaurants, and 1,000 places a small boy could disappear. "Ryan?" She was shouting now, not caring who stared. Her feet moved before her mind caught up, running toward the nearest cluster of people. "Has anyone seen a little boy, 6 years old, blonde hair, gray sweater?"
Faces looked at her with varying degrees of concern and confusion. A few people shook their heads. Most just moved past, focused on their own departures. Sarah ran to the information desk, words tumbling out in a rush. "My son, he's lost. I need help. He can't—" She couldn't finish sentences, couldn't organize thoughts into coherent requests. The woman behind the desk was already picking up a phone, already triggering protocols. "Ma'am, I need you to take a breath and give me information. Your son's name." "Ryan Mitchell. He's 6. He was right here and I looked away for 1 minute." The guilt wrapped around her throat like hands, like other hands 8 months ago that had tried to choke the life from her while her son watched. Physical description: blonde hair, gray turtleneck, jeans, glasses. Sarah's voice broke. "He can't talk. He has selective mutism. If he's scared, he won't be able to ask for help." The woman's expression shifted, urgency replacing routine concern. "Airport security is being notified now. We're paging you on the PA system. We'll find him." But Sarah was already moving again, running toward the gate areas, calling Ryan's name, even though she knew he couldn't call back. Even if he heard her voice, even if he was desperate to respond, his voice was locked behind the trauma she hadn't been able to protect him from. The memory crashed through her. 8 months ago, her husband's rage turned physical. Ryan in the doorway, watching his father hurt his mother. The police lights, the ambulance, the way Ryan had stopped speaking as suddenly as if someone had cut a wire. The therapist said it was trauma response, said it might take months or years, said it wasn't Sarah's fault. But it felt like her fault. Every silent day felt like her fault. And now this, losing him in an airport because she'd tried to help someone else, felt like the ultimate failure of the promise she'd made to him. "Keep you safe. Never let anything hurt you again. I promise, baby. I promise." The PA system crackled to life. "Would Sarah Mitchell please come to Terminal B Information Desk? Sarah Mitchell to Terminal B Information Desk." But Sarah wasn't at Terminal B anymore. She'd run through the connector to Terminal A, checking every gate, every waiting area, her eyes searching for gray sweater and blonde hair in an endless sea of travelers. Meanwhile, 300 yards away in Terminal B, Henry sat on the floor with Ryan and sketched rough airplane shapes in his notebook, anything to keep the boy distracted while they waited for Sarah to respond to the pages. Ryan had taken the pen again, drawing with intense focus, a coping mechanism, Henry realized, a way to communicate when words were impossible. Ryan drew an airplane, not a stick figure version, but a careful outline with wings and windows and landing gear. Then he pointed toward the massive windows overlooking the tarmac. Henry studied the drawing, pieced together the story. "You were watching planes when you got separated from your mom?" Ryan nodded, his expression grateful that Henry understood. "That's okay. Planes are pretty cool. I used to—" The PA system interrupted, sharp and urgent. "Attention all passengers. A suspicious package has been reported in Terminal C. As a precautionary measure, Terminal C is currently under temporary lockdown. Passengers should avoid Terminal C and follow the directions of security personnel. We apologize for any inconvenience." Henry's stomach dropped. Terminal C was on the opposite side of the airport from Terminal B, but lockdown protocols meant redirected crowds, increased security presence, and most importantly, Sarah Mitchell might be stuck on the wrong side of a security cordon. The search that should have been straightforward just became exponentially more complicated. Around them, the crowd's energy changed. Confusion rippled through clusters of travelers. People pulled out phones, checking flight statuses. Families gathered closer together. The ambient noise level rose as everyone tried to figure out if this affected them, if they needed to move, if their flights would be delayed. Ryan felt the shift. His eyes widened, his breathing quickening. The relative calm Henry had built over the past few minutes began to crack. The boy's hand gripped Diablo's fur tighter, his knuckles going white. "Hey, it's okay," Henry said, keeping his voice steady, even as his mind raced through contingencies. "That's a different terminal. We're safe here." But Ryan's chest was rising and falling too fast. His free hand pressed against his sternum, fingers splayed. The panic that had paused was returning, triggered by the announcement, by the crowd's agitation, by the fact that his mother's voice still hadn't reached him through the chaos. Diablo moved without prompting. The German Shepherd shifted his position, pressing his broad head directly under Ryan's hand, not waiting for the boy to reach for comfort, but offering it actively, insistently. The dog's warm weight pushed against Ryan's palm, steady and real and utterly calm in the middle of growing chaos. Ryan's eyes found Diablo's. The dog looked back at him with an expression of such patient understanding that something in Ryan's chest loosened slightly. Not enough, but enough to breathe, enough to hold on a few more minutes. Henry's radio crackled. Unit 47, be advised, Sarah Mitchell is currently in Terminal A, redirecting her to your location, ETA approximately 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Henry looked at Ryan, saw the trembling that ran through the boy's small frame, saw how close he was to breaking completely. 8 minutes might as well be 8 hours. "Your mom's coming, Ryan," Henry said, infusing his voice with certainty he didn't entirely feel. "She's in the airport. She's looking for you. 8 minutes and you'll see her." Ryan nodded but didn't look convinced. His breathing still came too fast. His eyes darted toward the growing crowd, the redirected passengers from Terminal C starting to flood into Terminal B's corridors. And Diablo stayed pressed against him, a wall of fur and loyalty between a silent boy and a world that gotten too loud to bear.
Henry watched Ryan's breathing accelerate, saw the way the boy's eyes had gone glassy with fear, and recognized the signs. He'd seen panic attacks before, in civilians during emergencies, in fellow officers after critical incidents, in himself once or twice in the quiet hours after everything went wrong. Ryan was spiraling, and sitting in the middle of a crowded terminal was only making it worse. "Ryan, I'm going to take you somewhere quieter, okay? Somewhere we can wait for your mom without all these people." Ryan didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't move. He'd gone rigid, locked in place by anxiety too overwhelming to navigate. His hand gripped Diablo's fur, but the rest of him had turned to stone. Henry stood slowly, extending his hand. "Come on, buddy, just a little walk." Nothing. Ryan stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, every muscle taut with resistance against movement. Moving meant leaving this spot. Moving meant his mother wouldn't find him. Moving meant more chaos, more strangers, more unknown. Henry started to crouch down, to try a different approach, when Diablo stood. The German Shepherd rose with deliberate grace, stretching his front legs. Then he did something Henry had never seen in 3 years of partnership. Diablo walked around to face Ryan directly, lowered his head, and gently nudged the boy's chest with his nose. Not forceful, not commanding, just a soft, insistent pressure that said, "I'm going this way. Come with me." Ryan's eyes focused on the dog. Diablo nudged again, then took 2 steps toward where Henry stood. He looked back at Ryan, ears forward, waiting. Ryan's frozen posture cracked. He took 1 shaky step, then another. His hand reached out, finding Diablo's back, and suddenly the boy was moving, following the dog the way a ship follows a lighthouse beam through fog. Henry felt something shift in his chest, understanding, respect, maybe something close to awe. Diablo hadn't waited for commands, hadn't followed protocol. The dog had read Ryan's need and solved the problem in the language the boy could understand. Presence, patience, wordless guidance. They moved through the terminal together, an unusual procession. Officer, dog, small boy with his hand buried in black and tan fur. Travelers stepped aside, some watching with curiosity, others too absorbed in their own journeys to notice. Henry led them through a staff door, down a quiet corridor, into a small security office usually reserved for break rotations. The silence felt like medicine after the terminal's chaos. Henry flipped on a single desk lamp rather than the harsh overhead fluorescence. He pulled a bottle of water from the small refrigerator, twisted it open, set it on the floor within Ryan's reach, found a blanket someone had left draped over a chair, soft fleece, slightly worn, and offered it to the boy. Ryan took the blanket but didn't wrap it around himself. Instead, he sank to the floor, the blanket pooling beside him. Diablo moved without hesitation, settling down and resting his broad head directly in Ryan's lap. The weight of it, the warmth, the steady breathing of a living creature who demanded nothing but offered everything. Ryan's hands found Diablo's ears, stroking the soft fur there. His breathing, which had been racing toward hyperventilation, gradually slowed. Not all at once, not easily, but breath by breath, the panic loosened its grip. His shoulders dropped an inch, his jaw unclenched, the glassy fear in his eyes cleared slightly, enough to see the room, to see Henry watching him, to see Diablo's patient face looking up at him with what could only be called devotion. Henry sat in the desk chair, giving them space, but staying close. He'd thought he understood working dogs. He'd been through the training, studied the manuals, worked alongside Diablo for 3 years. But this was different. This wasn't detecting explosives or tracking suspects or following commands. This was intuition, empathy, intelligence beyond anything protocol could teach. "He knows you need him, doesn't he?" Henry's voice was quiet, tinged with wonder. Ryan looked up at Henry, his hand stilled on Diablo's fur, and for the first time all day, the first time since he'd realized his mother had gone, Ryan smiled. Small, tentative, barely there, but real. Henry smiled back, feeling something fundamental shift in his understanding. This wasn't just a lost child protocol situation. This was a 6-year-old boy whose world had fractured 8 months ago and hasn't stopped fracturing since. A child who'd learned that speaking could be dangerous, that silence was safer, that trust was a risk. A traumatized kid who needed more than efficient police work. He needed someone to see him, to understand him, to meet him in the silence without demanding he break it. Henry pulled out his phone, dialed Sarah Mitchell's number from the information dispatch had provided. It rang once, twice, 6 times. Voicemail. He tried again, same result. She was probably in a dead zone between terminals, where the signal was jammed by the crowd density, or her phone was buried in her purse while she ran frantically through corridors calling Ryan's name. "Your mom's still looking," Henry told Ryan. "We'll find her, I promise." Ryan's expression turned hopeful but uncertain. Promises were hard things when you'd learned they could break. Henry scrolled through his phone, found his photo gallery, pictures of Diablo at training exercises, working with other canine units, receiving his certification, pictures of the graduation ceremony where Henry and Diablo became official partners. He turned the phone so Ryan could see. "You know, Diablo went to school just like you, had to learn all kinds of things. Sit, stay, track, search. He's pretty smart." Henry swiped to another photo. That's him with his instructor, and that's the day he passed his final test. Ryan leaned forward slightly, studying the images. His breathing had steadied, his color was returning. Diablo's presence anchored him, while Henry's quiet voice distracted him, pulled him away from the edge of panic. The PA system crackled. "Attention passengers, the situation in Terminal C has been cleared. Normal operations will resume shortly. We apologize for the inconvenience." Henry stood. The cleared lockdown meant Sarah could move freely now, meant security could coordinate better, meant the 8-minute estimate might actually hold. But it also meant crowds would surge again, people rushing to rebooked flights, families reuniting, chaos resuming. He looked at Ryan, curled on the floor with Diablo, fragile and brave in equal measure. The security office was safe, quiet, but passive waiting felt wrong. Ryan needed to be part of finding his mother, needed to feel like he had agency in his own rescue. "Ryan, what if we go find your mom together? You, me, and Diablo. We make a pretty good team." Ryan's eyes widened. Fear flickered across his face. Leaving this safe space meant facing the terminal again. But something else flickered too. Hope. The possibility of action instead of helpless waiting. Ryan looked down at Diablo. The dog gazed back at him, steady and calm as a heartbeat. Then Ryan nodded, small, determined, scared but willing.
Henry offered his hand. This time, Ryan took it.
They moved back into the terminal like divers entering deep water. The noise crashed over them, announcements, conversations, the rumble of rolling luggage across tile. But this time, Ryan had anchors, Henry's hand firm around his, Diablo's steady presence pressed against his left side. Henry keyed his radio as they walked. "Dispatch, Unit 47, we're mobile, searching for Sarah Mitchell. Do we have any camera footage on her location?" Static, then a woman's voice. "Stand by, 47. 30 seconds passed. Ryan's grip on Henry's hand tightened. "Security reports Sarah Mitchell was last seen on camera in Terminal A, Gate A23, approximately 4 minutes ago. Subject appeared to be searching, moving quickly through crowd." "Copy. Heading to Terminal A now." Terminal A was 3 moving walkways and 2 corridor turns away. Henry set a pace that Ryan could match, not rushing, but purposeful. Diablo walked beside Ryan, occasionally glancing up at the boy, adjusting his stride when Ryan's steps became uneven. "You're doing great, buddy," Henry said. Around them, travelers flowed in both directions. A businesswoman nearly collided with Ryan, correcting at the last second with an irritated huff. Henry shifted his position, putting himself between Ryan and the worst of the foot traffic. They stepped onto the first moving walkway. Ryan held the rubber handrail with his free hand, watching the terminal slide past. Henry noticed the boy's breathing had stayed relatively steady, better than in the chaos before. Diablo's presence was working like medicine. "You know what makes Diablo special?" Henry said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. Ryan looked up at him, gray eyes attentive behind his glasses. "He doesn't just follow orders. I mean, he does. He's really good at his job. But the best part about him is he listens to what people need even when they can't say it." Ryan's gaze shifted to Diablo, then back to Henry. "Like with you. I didn't tell him to stay beside you. I actually told him to come with me, remember? But he knew you needed him more than you needed protocol. He chose to stay." Henry paused, measuring his words. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is listen to what someone's not saying." Ryan's expression shifted, something opening, softening. He looked at Henry differently now, not just as the police officer who'd found him, but as someone who understood, who saw the silence not as a problem to fix, but as a language to learn. They reached Terminal A and the crowd density doubled. Gate A23 was deep in the terminal, past food courts and newsstands and clusters of travelers camped out with their luggage. Henry scanned faces as they moved, looking for brown hair, blue coat, a woman with the frantic energy of a mother searching for her lost child. Henry spoke into his radio again. "Dispatch, we're in Terminal A, looking for Sarah Mitchell, brown hair, approximately 5'6", light blue coat." The evacuation alarm cut through every other sound in the terminal. Not a gentle alert, not a calm notification, a piercing, oscillating wail that made people's heads snap up, that stopped conversations mid-word, that triggered immediate, instinctive fear. Red lights began flashing along the walls. The automated voice followed, flat and urgent. "Attention, this is an emergency evacuation. Please proceed calmly to the nearest exit. Do not use elevators. Proceed calmly to the nearest exit." For one suspended moment, the crowd froze. Then everyone moved at once. Not calmly, not in orderly lines toward marked exits, in a surge, a wave of bodies all trying to reach safety at the same time. Parents grabbed children, elderly travelers were swept along, luggage was abandoned. The noise of thousands of feet on tile mixed with shouts and crying and the relentless alarm. Henry pulled Ryan close, trying to create a protective barrier with his body. "Stay with me, hold on to—" But the crowd didn't part for a police officer and a small boy. It pushed. From all sides, bodies pressed against bodies. Someone's elbow caught Henry's shoulder. A rolling suitcase slammed into his shin. He kept his grip on Ryan's hand, felt the boy's fingers digging into his palm with desperate strength. Diablo barked, sharp, authoritative, trying to create space, but even a German shepherd couldn't hold back a panicked mob. Ryan's world shattered for the second time that day. The bodies around him were too close, too many, suffocating. The alarm shrieked in his ears, the flashing lights stabbed at his eyes. He couldn't see the exits, couldn't see where they were supposed to go, couldn't see anything but legs and coats and strangers pressing in from every direction. His breathing accelerated, gasping inhales that didn't bring enough air. His chest constricted, ribs feeling too small to contain his racing heart. Tears blurred his vision, spilling hot down his cheeks. The world tilted, sound becoming distorted, reality fragmenting into sharp-edged pieces. It was the night his voice died, happening again. The overwhelming terror, the inability to escape, the sense of being trapped in his own body while danger surrounded him. His father's rage, his mother's fear, the feeling of powerlessness so complete it had shut down his ability to speak. Henry felt Ryan's hand shaking violently in his, looked down and saw the boy's face gone pale, eyes wide and unseeing, mouth open in a silent scream. Panic attack, full-blown, no stopping it now, only riding it out. "Ryan, look at me! Ryan!" But the boy couldn't hear him, couldn't see him, lost inside the terror. The crowd surged again, stronger this time. A large man pushed past, separating Henry and Ryan by inches. Henry's grip slipped. Ryan's hand pulled away. For one heart-stopping second, Henry lost sight of the gray sweater in the chaos. "Ryan!" Diablo's bark cut through everything. The dog lunged forward, powerful body forcing through the crowd, reaching Ryan just as the boy's knees started to buckle. And in that moment, with a 6-year-old child on the verge of collapse, with hundreds of people in full evacuation panic, with the alarm screaming and the lights flashing and the world coming apart, Diablo made a choice that would save Ryan's life.
Diablo positioned himself around Ryan with the precision of a soldier taking defensive formation. The German Shepherd circled the collapsing boy, his body becoming a living barrier between Ryan and the surging crowd. He planted his legs wide, lowering his center of gravity, making himself immovable. His broad chest faced outward, his muscular shoulders created a wall. When a businessman tried to push past, Diablo shifted, blocking the man's path. When a woman with a rolling suitcase came too close, the dog's body absorbed the impact, protecting Ryan from the blow. A low warning bark rumbled from Diablo's chest, not aggressive, not attacking, but clear, unmistakable. "Stay back. This child is under my protection." People veered around them, some annoyed, some understanding, all too panicked to stop. The crowd flowed like water around a stone, and Diablo was the stone, unmoving, unyielding. Henry fought his way back to them, using his body to shield from above. He dropped to one knee, creating a canopy over Ryan with his torso, his arms spread wide to push back anyone who came too close. "Give us space, move around." Together they created a pocket of safety in the chaos. Henry above, Diablo surrounding, and in the center, Ryan, crumbling. The boy had stopped trying to stand, his legs folded beneath him. He collapsed against Diablo's side, his small body shaking with sobs that made no sound. His hands clutched the dog's fur like it was the only solid thing in a world that had liquefied. Tears streamed down his face, his breathing came in ragged gasps. The panic had him completely now, drowning him from the inside while the evacuation alarm screamed overhead. Diablo stood firm. The dog's warmth bled through Ryan's sweater. The steady rise and fall of the animal's breathing became a rhythm Ryan could feel even if he couldn't match it. Every tremor that ran through the boy's body was absorbed by the dog's mass, as if Diablo could take the fear into himself and transmute it into something bearable. Henry's radio crackled with updates, false alarm, system malfunction, evacuation being called off, but he ignored it. His attention stayed on Ryan, on keeping this fragile space protected until the child could breathe again. Then, cutting through the alarm and the crowd noise and everything else, a voice. "Ryan!" A woman's voice, raw with desperation and relief and 8 months of accumulated fear. "Ryan!" Henry's head snapped up. He saw her breaking through the thinning crowd, brown hair wild, blue coat disheveled, face streaked with tears.
Sarah Mitchell moved like a force of nature, shoving past anyone in her path, her eyes locked on the small gray-sweatered form collapsed against the police dog. "Ryan, baby, I'm here!" She fell to her knees at the edge of their protective circle, her hands reaching out but stopping just short, afraid to overwhelm him, afraid to do anything that might hurt him more. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Ryan's eyes, unfocused with panic, found his mother's face. The world stopped spinning, the chaos receded. Nothing existed except her, the person who'd held him through nightmares, who'd learned to hear his silence, who'd promised to keep him safe even when the world proved that safety was a fragile thing. His mouth opened. Sarah saw it, the familiar shape of his lips forming words that wouldn't come. She'd seen it 1,000 times in 8 months, her son trying to speak, his voice locked behind trauma's door. She'd learned not to hope, learned not to expect, learned to love him in the silence. But this time was different. This time, sound came. Quiet, barely more than a whisper, broken by tears and trauma and the fact that he hadn't used his voice in 243 days, but unmistakably, impossibly real. "Mama." The word hung in the air like a miracle. Sarah's sob tore from her throat, raw and broken and beautiful. She lunged forward, pulling Ryan into her arms, wrapping herself around him like she could shield him from every hurt the world had ever delivered. "Ryan, oh God, Ryan, my baby, my brave, brave baby." Ryan's breathing gradually slowed, matching his mother's. The panic drained from his body, leaving exhaustion in its wake. He pulled back enough to look at her face, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there in months. Not just fear, not just trauma, but hope. The possibility that maybe, eventually, he could find his voice again, that silence didn't have to be forever. Ryan turned his head, looking at Diablo. The German Shepherd sat at attention now, his professional composure returned, but his dark eyes remained fixed on the boy with unmistakable concern. Ryan's hand reached out, touching Diablo's head. His lips moved, forming shapes. No sound came this time. One word was all he had, the only one that mattered enough to break 8 months of silence. But his expression said everything. "Thank you. You saved me. I heard you when you heard me." Diablo's tail wagged once, twice, a simple acknowledgement between two souls who'd learned to communicate beyond words. Henry stood behind his partner, his hand resting on Diablo's back. He looked at Sarah holding Ryan, at the reunion that had seemed impossible an hour ago, and felt the weight of what he'd almost missed. If he had followed protocol, if he had stayed efficient and detached, if he had insisted Diablo obey commands instead of listening to the dog's intuition, this moment might never have happened. Sarah looked up at Henry, her eyes red but luminous. "Thank you, both of you. I can't." Words failed her. "He's a brave kid," Henry said quietly. "He asked for help the only way he could. We just had to learn to listen." Sarah pulled Ryan close again, pressing her lips to the top of his head. Around them, the terminal returned to normal. Flights resumed boarding, announcements called passengers to gates. The crisis passed, leaving only its aftermath. A mother and son reunited, a police officer and his dog, and the understanding that sometimes the most important rescues happen in silence.
The medical station smelled like antiseptic and coffee. Ryan sat on an examination table while a paramedic checked his vitals. Pulse elevated but returning to normal, blood pressure fine, no visible injuries. Sarah stood beside him, one hand never leaving his shoulder, anchoring both of them to this moment of safety. Henry waited nearby with Diablo, giving them space but not leaving entirely. He'd seen the reunion, heard the impossible word, but questions remained, questions he needed answered to understand what he'd just witnessed. The paramedic finished her assessment. Physically, he's fine. No injuries. The panic attack was severe, but he's coming down from it well. She looked at Sarah with professional compassion. Follow up with his regular doctor, but he doesn't need emergency care. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the emotion still lodged in her throat. When the paramedic left, Sarah turned to Henry. Diablo had moved to sit beside Ryan, and the boy's hand had immediately found its place in the dog's fur, like that was where it belonged now. "I need to explain," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears that hadn't quite stopped. About Ryan. About why he... She looked at her son, then back to Henry. 8 months ago, his father attacked me. Ryan witnessed it. Domestic violence. It was... Her breath hitched. It was bad enough that I thought I might die. Ryan stood in the doorway watching his father try to kill his mother. Henry's expression didn't change, but something tightened behind his eyes. Understanding. Horror. Recognition of trauma he'd seen before in other victims, other children. That night, Ryan stopped speaking. Not gradually, just gone. The doctors call it selective mutism, triggered by severe trauma. His voice works, the capability is there, but the pathway shut down to protect him from what he witnessed. She looked at Ryan with such fierce love it was almost painful to witness. He hasn't spoken since that night. I thought I'd never hear his voice again. Henry glanced at Ryan, seeing the boy differently now. Not just a lost child, a survivor, someone who'd endured something no 6-year-old should ever see and found a way to keep living anyway. He found a different way to call for help, Henry said quietly. That signal he gave, that saved him. He couldn't speak, but he could still communicate. That took incredible courage. Sarah's eyes filled again. I didn't even know he remembered the signal from school. I thought... She pressed her hand to her mouth, composing herself. Thank you, both of you. You and Diablo. You gave him back to me. Diablo's ears twitched at the sound of his name. Ryan stroked the dog's head, his own breathing finally steady, his color returning to normal. Henry looked at Ryan, then at Sarah, then at his partner who'd somehow known exactly what this traumatized child needed. Something crystallized in his mind, sharp and clear as broken glass catching light. There are probably other kids like Ryan out there, Henry said slowly, working through the thought as he spoke it. Kids who can't speak when they're scared or lost. Kids with trauma, anxiety, autism, any number of reasons why their voice won't work in an emergency. And our protocols don't account for them. We're trained to ask questions, get verbal responses, communicate through speech. If Diablo hadn't seen Ryan's signal, he didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Sarah looked at him with sudden intensity. Then maybe we should change that. The gymnasium of Riverside Elementary School smelled like floor polish and children. 3 months had passed since the airport, since the evacuation alarm, since one impossible word had broken 8 months of silence. Henry and Sarah stood at the front of the room beneath a banner that read Silent Signals Community Safety Program in bright, cheerful letters. 50 children sat cross-legged on the floor, parents lined the walls, and Diablo lay beside Henry in his best professional demonstration posture. Who can show me the help signal? Sarah asked the children. 30 hands shot up, fingers pressed together, thumbs tucked in. The children held them high, some giggling, some serious, all learning that asking for help didn't require words. Henry walked through the crowd with Diablo, demonstrating how the canine officers would respond. When you see this signal, you stop everything else. This child needs help, and they're asking for it the best way they can. In the front row, Ryan sat beside his therapist. He wore a red sweatshirt today, his blonde hair a little longer than it had been at the airport. When Sarah called on him, he stood carefully. His voice, when it came, was quiet but clear and full of emotion that words could barely contain. The signal means you need help when you can't talk. It means someone will see you. The other children nodded seriously, understanding that this wasn't just a game, but something real, something important. Ryan sat back down beside a golden retriever puppy, a service dog in training that his therapist had introduced 2 weeks ago. The puppy's presence helped him feel safe enough to practice speaking, to rebuild the pathway that trauma had severed. He still had silent days, still had moments when words wouldn't come, but more and more his voice was returning, word by careful word.
The program had expanded beyond anything Henry and Sarah had imagined. Visual safety stations now marked every terminal in Philadelphia International Airport. Pictures showing the help signal, multilingual instructions, contact information for lost children who couldn't speak. Shopping malls installed similar stations. Schools across the district taught the signals to every student. The police department had revised their training. Trauma-informed approaches to nonverbal children became mandatory. Henry had requested and received specialized canine training focused on recognizing distress signals, reading body language, understanding that protection sometimes meant patience instead of action. On a Saturday morning, 6 weeks after the school demonstration, Ryan visited the police station. He held his mother's hand as they walked through the corridors, but his steps were eager, excited. When they reached the canine unit, Diablo was there, ears perking up the moment he saw the small boy in the red sweatshirt. The German Shepherd bounded forward, tail wagging with undisguised joy. Henry released his lead, trusting Diablo completely. Ryan knelt as Diablo reached him, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. Diablo's tail swept back and forth, his nose pressed to Ryan's cheek, making that low whine of happiness that Henry learned meant, "This is my person, this is who I protect." Ryan pulled back enough to look into Diablo's eyes. His voice, when it came, was clear and strong, and full of emotion that words could barely contain. "Thank you, Diablo. You heard me when I couldn't talk." Henry watched from a few feet away, Sarah beside him. She looked at the officer who'd saved her son and saw tears in his eyes he wasn't bothering to hide. "You gave him more than safety that day," she said softly. "You gave him hope." Henry shook his head, his gaze never leaving the boy and dog in front of him. "Diablo did that. I just followed his lead." The station wall behind them told the story of the past 3 months. Photographs covered the painted cinder blocks, children who'd used the silent signal, who'd been found and reunited with families, who'd been seen when they couldn't make themselves heard. Each photo showed a child with the officer who'd responded, many with canine partners beside them. Ryan's photo was first, placed in the center where everyone who entered could see it. He sat beside Diablo, both of them looking at the camera. Ryan's hand rested on Diablo's back. The dog's expression was alert, protective, proud. And Ryan, 6-year-old Ryan, who'd lost his voice to violence and found it again through connection, was smiling. Sometimes the most important words are the ones we never have to say. Sometimes communication happens in raised hands and intuitive understanding, in the press of warm fur against trembling fingers, in the choice to stay when protocol says leave. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who hear the silence and answer anyway, with patience, with presence, with the understanding that being saved doesn't always sound like rescue. Sometimes it sounds like a heartbeat. Sometimes it feels like protection. Sometimes it looks like a German shepherd refusing to move from a frightened child's side. And sometimes, when you're very lucky, it sounds like a single word spoken after 8 months of silence. Mama.
If you love stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time, always remember that there is a hero in every dog.